Welcome to the meeting of the Backbench Business Committee, which will be in two parts this afternoon. We're considering the applications for Estimate Day debates, which will take place on Wednesday, March the 5th. We have some 11 applications to consider, and then further from that, we'll have a further 7 applications for our general debates taking place under Backbench Business criteria. So the first application we're considering is from Alistair Carmichael on the financial future of farming. Alistair, over to you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you very much for entertaining the application. You will see under the reasons for the debate section a fairly extensive and comprehensive explanation about what is going on within the budgets of DEFRA at the moment. And it's for that reason that we are keen to see the estimates for DEFRA, supplementary DEFRA estimates being debated. If I might, you very kindly recently gave me a half-day debate for the future of farming. I would say two things about that. First of all, I think we had something in excess of 60 people wanting that, so it's eminently feasible that we would actually fill both. I think one, at least, the one that we have, I would anticipate would be oversubscribed. But the financial future of farming, the current financial position of the department, the move towards ELMS, which has been badly mismanaged, and candidly, given what we have heard recently in the Select Committee about the senior officials within the department and how they see it as being managed, I think this is a slightly narrower, it's a significantly narrower application. The debate that we have already, I would want to canvass a broader range of issues in the longer term, the meaningful definition, for example, of food security and the rest of it. This is very much a debate on the finances in the here and now, and that's where the early ending of the basic payment scheme, the ending of the ring fence around money going to the devolved administrations, all come into sharper relief, and that's the distinction I would draw with that.
Thank you. Can I just be clear? At the moment, your application only has 2 government speakers. Obviously, we can be looking. Sorry, this is for all applicants.
Right.
We'll be looking for balanced government and opposition speakers in our determination.
That's fair enough. I would expect no less, and I would think I would be able to acquire a number of other Labour members, okay, if that were the only barrier. And
the other question from me, for our colleagues, is obviously we've got 11 applications. We are likely to only be able to allow 3 slots altogether. So if you're not chosen, would you want to go on the list of debates that we would consider for future times as normal backbench business debates?
Yes, subject to what I've already said about having the future of farming debate. What sort of timescale would you be looking at there?
Probably June, late June, early July.
All these issues will still be pertinent in June, I fear.
Any other questions, colleagues? No? All right. Thank you. The clerks will be in touch. Next application is from Chair Murrah on the spending of the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology in establishing the Digital Centre of Government.
Yes.
Over to you, Chief.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Chair. And this is my first time before the Backbench Business Committee, so apologies if I get the protocol wrong. But I just wanted the opportunity. I'm grateful for the opportunity to say a few words about this application. So you've got the application form. I mean, basically, the government is establishing the Department Science, Innovation and Technology as the centre for digital government. It's moving the machinery of government around in order to do that. And the aim is to, from Peter Kyle and from Keir as well, is to transform government to make it more digital, to make it more accessible, to reduce costs as well. And that's an important part of the government's ability to meet its fiscal rules, I would argue, and also to make public services more tailored, to eliminate fraud. There was a whole heap of ambition that lies within the establishing the Centre for Digital Government. And one of the many questions sort of around this is whether the finances that have been transferred, so day-to-day spending on the department is set to increase by 71% or £430 million in the current year, whether the finances that have been transferred from the government, cabinet office, etc., can actually drive this transformation, and because the transformation requires investment in hardware, in infrastructure, and broadband and computers. It also requires investment. I think this is really important. Investment in people, in civil service. The public sector does not have a great record on digital transformation and IT. In fact, the history is littered with huge, expensive failures. And so the opportunity that this debate provides is to discuss the detail, as much as we know, of the digital transformation. My committee has launched an inquiry examining the topic of digital centre of government, which will be taking evidence in public in late March. And it's a clear priority for the government, but we are not clear about how it will actually how it will work. But it will certainly impact every single constituent and citizen in the country. And so it's an opportunity for members, and I think that's why we've got cross-party support. It's an opportunity for members to raise issues around public services, around digital inclusion, around broadband connectivity, around AI, AI and copyright. There are a whole host of issues which can be raised and which members are really keen to raise, as I think we saw in the data and the data use and access bill discussion, that members are really keen to raise, and I think it would be really great for Parliament to be seen to be discussing this, as digital transformation, AI, etc., are issues that touch constituents' lives. It would be great for Parliament and for MPs to be seen to be discussing that. Just a couple more points. We know that DCIT has underspent significantly across a range of projects. So DCIT is handing back £800 million to the Treasury of investment spending, and projects including ARIA and Building Digital are also handing back money. So in principle there is money there, but we don't know how it's going to be used and what scopes and levels of investment are necessary. I'm particularly keen on the investment in people. I think the civil service has to be part of this digital transformation, and I don't think that I've seen that. I'm also really interested in the link between local government and central government, because this transformation has to happen in our communities as well. And again, I'm not sure that we're seeing that. So,
okay. Well, thank you for the presentation. One question I have is, obviously, we can only choose 3 of these applications.
Yes.
In the event that you're not successful, would you want to be added to our list, a waiting list for debates in the Chamber? I
think you did say to Alistair that that waiting list would sort of be around June time. Did you say that it would possibly? I think yes, we would do, because whilst our inquiry would have progressed, the issues would still be there, though perhaps not as sort of pertinent as immediate as it was following the spending review.
Questions, colleagues? Anything? No? Everyone's happy? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The clerks will be in touch. The next application is on behalf, a joint application on behalf of the Public Accounts Committee and the Health and Social Care Committee. Neither of the chairs of those select committees are available, but I understand that Nasil Kaliskan will be presenting. There you are, yes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I too, it's my first time at the committee, so here we go. The The chair of our committee sends his apologies. He's on a pre-planned visit, as is the vice chair. So I'm presenting the application for the debate. It's in the context of the Department of Health and Social Care being one of the high spending departments, as members will be aware, and that there is planned increase in spending, a significant increase planned. But the application comes on the back of a National Audit Office report which sets out concerns for the productivity that would be required of NHS England in order to be able to meet its own targets, but also to prevent a year-on-year increase in budgets and spending. The National Audit Office report also set out a number of recommendations which were discussed at a recent Public Accounts Committee where officials from the Department of Health and NHS England attended. On the back of that, the Public Accounts Committee published a report in which we were disappointed with the response from those officials. I think that is a position that the committee, the Health and Social Care Committee, also expressed following their session with the same officials. There are a number of important announcements made by the Secretary of State in terms of the direction for reform, and given the levels of spending in the NHS, we think it's appropriate and an important moment in time where we'll be able to shape and input into potential reforms alongside what will be considerable spending and an opportunity to ensure that the efficiencies that are required are delivered. I think I'll stop there and take any questions, Chair.
Obviously, I'll ask the same question as I asked before. In the event that you're not successful, would you want to go on the waiting list for a future debate?
Yeah, certainly. I think so. I think the challenges around NHS, particularly spending, won't disappear. But I will just stress that I do think this moment in time is a real opportunity to be able to input into what will be important reforms following the Darcy report, and so I would just urge the committee to consider it with great interest.
It's fallen upon our ears. Yeah. Any questions, colleagues? No? No. Right, thank you very much. The clerks will be in touch. The next application is a joint application by the International Development Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee, and it's on the spending of the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, and Monica Harding is presenting. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm here to speak to an application on behalf of both the International Development Select Committee and the Foreign Affairs Select Committee for an Estimates Day debate on the spending of the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. As you've said, both committees are travelling on visits this week, so are unfortunately unable to attend today. The FCDO is not the largest spending government department. This financial year it spent just under 13 billion, but it is one of the 4 great offices of state and plays a hugely important role in promoting our values and interests and in protecting our national security. And particularly today, when geopolitics affects our everyday and are in such a state of flux and uncertainty, we need to be nimble in our responses to ensure the UK's influence and indeed our role on the world stage is absolute. Most of the Foreign Office's spending is on official development assistance, that is on aid and international development. The government has set out its aim of restoring the UK's development reputation and building stronger relationships with the global south, following cuts to the aid budget made by the previous government. However, in the autumn budget, development spending was cut again, to 0.5% of GNI, the lowest level in 14 years. And today, the Prime Minister has announced today that development will be cut again to 0.3% to raise defence spending to 2.5% of GNI. This will reduce ODA to its lowest level at any point during the 21st century. The FCDO's ODA spend is also under significant pressure from the utilisation of around a quarter of it on the costs of hosting refugees and asylum seekers in the UK. And these costs reduced the aid budget available for the FCDO to use overseas. And the Prime Minister made clear today that ODA, even once reduced to 0.3% of GNI, will continue to be used to host refugees in the UK. And this further intensifies drain on overseas aid. So consequently, although domestic ODA spend is set to reduce this year, the FCDO budget will remain stretched and therefore must be spent as effectively as possible, and this is why we want to scrutinise it. Consequently, members will have also seen that the US administration is also aiming to close its aid agency, USAID, and has frozen its ODA spending. The US is by far the world's largest aid donor, and reductions in its spending, particularly when combined with today's dramatic reduction in UK aid, raises serious questions about the likely impact on the world and development projects, but also about our development activity and our strategic goals. The FCDO also plays a crucial role in promoting the UK's soft power, and the department supports several organisations like the BBC World Service and the British Council. These could not survive without FCDO financial support, and their long-term sustainability is not guaranteed, and there have been recent cuts made to the World Service workforce. And this also raises questions about the impact of today's cut, so those like the World Service that are looking for an increase from the ODA budget. The FCDO's frontline diplomatic work is also hugely important in supporting the UK's international partnerships and alliances and our position in multilateral institutions such as the UN. In a time of global uncertainty, this work is more important than ever. The government has stated that UK diplomacy must support its missions, including promoting growth, which is a move away from traditional diplomacy. And so, with today's consequential announcements, the spending review imminent, and the major geopolitical upheaval, it's important that the House has an opportunity to debate how the FCDO should best use its resources and to raise these points with the government.
Okay. Thank you. One question from me is, obviously, if you're not successful in this round, would you want your application to go on the waiting list?
Yes, I think so. Okay. I think this isn't going to go away.
Colleagues, any questions? No? Happy? Yep. Okay, thank you very much. The clerks will be in touch in due course. The next application is from John Glenn on the future of health and social care, which we're suggesting might be altered to be spending of the Department of Health and Social Care as an application.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. It's a great opportunity to make this case. I mean, obviously, this is a massive aspect of public spending, 165 billion on the NHS budget this year. And, you know, the new government have got lots of things that they've taken on, and there are lots of things following the Lord Darcy report that are now under close scrutiny. And obviously, the additional investment and the effectiveness of that expenditure is very much in focus. And I think that gives an opportunity for the whole House, from all parties, to make constructive contributions about that additional money and reflect their concerns, positive and negative, about what is happening. I think the operational effectiveness of the NHS is something that has universal application, and therefore I think it will attract a lot of speakers, both from the sort of questions of capital investment and day-to-day expenditure. The government committed just before Christmas, I believe, to update the workforce plan, which the previous government had put in place, a 10-year plan, and that will attract also a lot of interest. I think, given the extraordinary investment that the government have put in and the amount of political capital that's been invested in the NHS as part of the narrative around growth and enabling growth, then I think it would also be something that would have wider interest from the public that we serve. So I submit to the committee that this would give us scope to cover all aspects of the NHS, interaction with the new investment that the government have put in terms of the disability facilities grant, also the interaction with Baroness Casey's work as well on social care. Obviously that attracts a range of views across the House. So I think we all want the NHS to work well, and this would be a great opportunity to scrutinise that properly in the context of vast amounts of taxpayers' money in play.
Okay, you heard the previous application on health and social care.
Yes.
Where does this differ from that first application?
Well, I think it's that the member from the Public Accounts Committee would look at it from a sort of a narrower point of view, probably around efficiencies and previous reports from the Public Accounts Committee around the efficiency of the spend. There will be some of that in my contention, but I think there is also the sort of wider strategic direction of the NHS, looking at primary care, look at the interaction with local authorities, looking at the assertions made around the capital programme. So I think there's more room to get into the weeds of how the operationalisation of also the workforce as well, and how that's working. But obviously there's some overlap, I respect that.
Okay. Ian, do you want to add anything?
No, because I misheard you when you called them, and I thought you were calling me out on mine. But it's a much better view here too, by the way. So.
I welcome his proximity and support, I'm sure.
Yes, he has my support, by the way.
Okay, obviously, you said there is overlap.
Yes.
Would you be open to potentially merging the debates if it meant you were guaranteed to get a debate is one thing. And the second one is more of a statement, but there's shamefully only 2 Labour MPs on there. Have you had any contact with others to try and get the 50-50 balance?
Yeah, so to your first question, absolutely. I think in terms of securing a debate on health linked to both applications, that would sound a reasonable compromise that I would be totally happy to make. Of the 15, I think there are 2 Labour, 1 Liberal Democrat. I think there's more work to be done, but my assertion would be that if we had the time, then I think we'd have no trouble, given the number of Labour MPs that there are and the number of constituency interests that would arise and the opportunity this would give people. It would be a well-subscribed debate, and I think there's more work for me to do to get more people submitted on the names.
Yes, well, you've got until we finish this afternoon. Any other questions, colleagues? No? Okay, fine. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
The next application is the spending of the Scotland office. Patricia Ferguson is presenting on behalf of the Scottish Affairs Committee.
Good afternoon. The Scotland office spending has not been the subject of a Commons debate for many years, something that we think should be remedied. And the spending of the Scotland office has therefore not been scrutinised in quite the same way as many other spending departments have been. We think this debate would be a timely opportunity to remind the Scotland office and the government that the spending of smaller departments is just as important to Parliament as the spending of the larger departments. And whilst the spending of the Scotland office reflected in the supplementary estimates is relatively small, the estimate contains very significant changes to Scotland's block grant, nearly £2.5 billion. And this £2.5 billion of additional funding is Barnett consequentials arising from the autumn budget. And the additional funding impacts the everyday lives of millions of people by determining the level of public services that can be delivered in Scotland. It's been the subject of much public debate and of political interest, and I think it's appropriate for the House to consider this and examine this in some detail, not least because the UK Government has championed the Barnett consequentials reflected in the supplementary estimates as a record settlement. And given the importance the Government has attached to the settlement, we think it's right it is scrutinised in some detail. The Scottish Government potentially has only until the end of this financial year to spend much of the Barnett consequentials it will receive. And it is therefore again appropriate that this funding and the mechanisms used by the UK Government to determine them and the fiscal constraints within which the funding can be utilised or not is examined by the House. We also think that the proposed debate is relevant not just to Scottish MPs, but also potentially to Welsh and Northern Irish MPs too. The live relevance and topicality, I suppose, of this is demonstrated through the live inquiries of the Scottish and Northern Ireland Affairs Committees. Our committee, the Scottish Affairs Committee, is looking into the financing of the Scottish Government, and the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee, I understand, is looking at the funding of public services in Northern Ireland. So it would seem to be an opportune time for us to look at this. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, Chair.
Obviously, the question I've been asking everyone is, if you're not successful this afternoon, would you want to go on our waiting list for a future debate?
Yes, as I say, both ourselves and the Northern Ireland Committee have live inquiries into the subjects anyway, so it would probably be a good time to have one a little bit later too.
And the other observation I would make is that of the 11 speakers you've got, only 2 are from the opposition. Would you be able to get some more opposition members to support the application?
I believe we would. In fact, we had one additional just before I came to the meeting of Jamie Stone from the Liberal Democrats.
I can see one that's behind you, actually. That might want
and we'd be very happy to make sure that we get additional speakers. I don't think we'd have a problem, and I think too, if we were able to continue the discussion into the issues around Welsh and Irish funding too, it would be very helpful to those colleagues.
Any other questions, colleagues? No? Okay. Thank you very much. The clerks will be in touch. Right, the next application is from Sir Ian Duncan Smith. So you can come forward now, Ian. On spending of the department for work and pensions on benefits.
Well, I, am loath to return to a department I ran for 6 years, but I thought it would be useful at this particular point because it does seem to me that obviously after COVID, the whole department's expenditures and costs ballooned, and that was obviously a feature of the nature of the breakdown in terms of employment, etc. But it is therefore also one of the departments that the government keeps talking about, and it's constantly being referred to in terms of what may have to happen. I have my own particular views on that and how they could do it, but that's not really the point of this. This is really that with all of that talk, there's been precious little debate or time for discussion on what is a really critical issue. And it does seem to me that there are rises already in the budget, they're looking at them, particularly with the running costs of the department, which I remember I took 4 billion out of, and now seem to be all of that's gone, and it's rising through the last government, rising now here in the forecasts. So there are a lot of reasons why I think there should be a debate on this. It's one of the biggest, if it's probably the biggest cost expenditure in government. It dictates hugely a lot of other counterfactuals, such as, for example, behaviour of individuals, issues around health, mental health particularly, are caught up in this. And of course then government ad hoc changes that have been made, such as things like the winter fuel allowance. Now, this would encompass them in a wider debate, not just narrow debates about whether or not you should cut winter fuel. The question is, what are the effects in the round on the single biggest budget that the government has and the complexity of that? And so it does seem to me that there is a reason, and I spoke to a number of people about this and they all agreed. And I've had, believe it or not, a number of calls with various Labour colleagues who work with me on other things, and they've all said yes, they would all want to take part. They're slightly edgy about putting their name down in this particular instance. There are 3 Labour MPs that have done so, but I can tell you that I know that others would step up to the debate without question. It would be an important debate to be had.
Okay, and same questions I've asked every other applicant. If you're not successful, because we can probably only have 3 debates here, would you be wanting to be added to the waiting list of debates?
I think, yes, I think that is the answer, although I'd be obviously astonished if it wasn't picked, but that's not so important as a subject.
What the deliberations of the committee are. Any questions, colleagues? No? Okay, right, thank you, Ian.
Very kind of you, thank you.
The next application is from Kirsten Backman on, once again, the spending of the Department for Work and Pensions on social security and pensions. Over to you, Kirsty.
Thank you very much, Chair. In terms of social security and pensions, this is one of the biggest hot topics for all of our constituents. It's certainly a thing that I get a huge amount of traffic about. people are really concerned about the cost of living. They're really concerned about how the social security system impacts on their ability to afford heating payments, to afford energy payments, to afford buying food. They're concerned about the inflationary impact on food particularly. And then again, we've seen again this morning another increase in energy prices. So people are really worried about it, and this makes a particular difference to particularly those at the bottom of the pile, people that are struggling the most. Social security is incredibly important to them. In terms of where we are right now, this is about the supplementary estimates, which specifically focuses on the in-year changes that there are. There has been a significant number of in-year announcements in relation to the DWP budget, particularly around social security and pensions. So we've seen a £1.5 billion reduction in relation to the winter fuel payment. That is a change since the main estimates. We've seen the Child Poverty Task Force be kicked off and the government's focus around reducing child poverty. We've seen the Get Britain Working paper and announcements by the government about refocusing some of social security in terms of trying to get more people into work. The WASPI Public Health Ombudsman announcement that was made by the government again in year since the main estimates came. And then forthcoming, we've also got the Public Authorities Fraud Bill that is going through that is about tackling fraud in the benefits and social security system, and some changes coming to disability payments. In relation to kind of wider support and other reasons why this debate could be really important, is there's clear third sector support and interest. I get a significant number, again, of third sector organisations in touch with me around this. And also, this is a UK-wide issue. Unlike some of the other issues that have been mentioned today, this would be relevant to every single one of us sitting in the chamber. It is something that makes a difference across the UK. I don't have, as a member of a fourth party, despite the fact that I wear lots of hats for my party, I don't have any of the rights that are associated with being either a frontbencher or a chair of a select committee, for example. So, an opportunity like this is what I would love the Backbench Business Committee to be about and what it often is about. And that's why I thought it was really important to make this pitch, because being able to talk about government spend is something that is so unusual in the chamber of the House of Commons. We get to debate the budget, for example, but that's entirely, all the decisions taken on that are around tax. So it is a real kind of moment. And then just lastly, on the kind of range of parties that there are, I have managed to get a fairly significant range of parties. I'm aware that there's not enough government MPs on that, but I would agree with Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, who's applying, as I say, for a very similar debate, but without pensions included in his one, that if you add mine plus his, you certainly get, in terms of DWP, more than enough to fill a third or half of a day in the chamber.
Thank you. You've answered one of the questions straight away. The other question, of course, is if you're not successful, would you want to be added to the waiting list?
So notwithstanding the fact that I think this is particularly important just now, because it is the supplementary estimates and because of the in-year changes, I still think that this will be a topical issue into the future, so I would very much appreciate it if I was added as well.
I'd just make the observation that if you do merge the two bids, you actually end up, I think, with 6 different Labour members, yes, as opposed to 3 on each, as it were. So yeah, that would solve one of the issues that we would have.
I would have no problem with merging the bids. I don't know whether Sir Ian Duncan-Smith would have a problem with merging the bids, but that would not be an issue for me. For me, it's more important that this is debated than that it's my name on it, if you like.
Okay. Any other questions, colleagues? No? Thank you, Kirsty. We'll move on then to Andy Slaughter. And this application is on the spending of the Ministry of Justice on criminal justice.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And I anticipate one of your questions by saying I think I slightly misunderstood the rules here, and I got all my select committee to sign up, which is why we voted, and only one of my 2 Conservatives were there, so that's why I think there's only one Conservative name on there. I don't think I'm going to have any problem, because I then filled up the rest of the application form with people asking to go on there. And so if I need to get extra Conservatives, I'm sure I can do that. And the reason is I think this is a very interesting subject to members at the moment. We could have asked for other aspects. We could have asked about civil justice, we could have asked about legal aid and things of that kind. But criminal justice is a particular concern because of the situation in the courts, 70,000 cases backed up in the Crown Court, in prisons which are almost full again despite the early releases, and the probation service, which is being asked to do a lot more heavy lifting with and is very underpowered at the moment. So I think it's a real and immediate concern. There was extra money in the budget. There's 1.9 billion. The supplementary estimates saw a 1.1 billion increase. I think this is all on the form. But when you look at where some of that money is coming from, we had nearly 700 million, which was underspent on capital and just transferred over from the prison building firm. We've got over £1 billion worth of backlog in the prison maintenance, but 85 million was handed back because the main contractor hadn't spent it, was unable to spend it in that year. There are major financial issues to address here coming out of the supplementary estimates in that way. Or to put it another way, as a final comment, there's a lot going on in policy terms in the MOJ at the moment. There's a sentencing review, there's a criminal justice review. They are obviously intended to relieve some of the pressures, but in a way the more difficult issue is around efficiency and resources. Are the additional resources sufficient for the problems that are there? Is there sufficient efficiency? Obviously, from what I've said so far, the implication is no. And I think, therefore, an opportunity under the guise of the estimates to do that would be very valuable. So my answer to your other question, Chair, which is, would we accept a reserve position? Again, I thought that select committees didn't generally get those slots. So if that is available, yes, we would have it, but we would prefer clearly to have the estimates debate.
Fine, thank you. Thank you very much. It's very helpful. Any questions from colleagues?
I think covered it really well.
No?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. And the clerks will be in touch with you in due course. The next application, we're going to take Helen Hayes on behalf of the Education Committee on spending of the Department for Education on SEND provision. Helen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Really welcome this opportunity to present this application to the committee. It is an application coming from the Education Select Committee for a debate on the spending of the Department for Education on SEND provision. SEND is the single biggest crisis in the whole of the education system at the moment. I don't think there is an MP in the House of Commons who doesn't have a substantial caseload of parents whose children are being failed by the system at the moment, who are fighting every single day for the resources that they need. There is a huge human cost to that in the lives of children who aren't getting the education currently that they are entitled to. But it's also an enormous issue for public spending as a whole. It has ramifications for the current crisis, not only for the Department for Education, but also for the Department for Housing, Communities and Local Government because of the impact on local authorities. We are at an absolute crux point now with the statutory override, which allows SEND deficits of local authorities to be taken off their books so that local authorities can set a balanced budget without accounting for their SEND deficits, due to come to an end in 2026. And the government hasn't yet set out how it proposes to deal with that cliff edge. If there is no solution to the cliff edge, we will see around 50% of local authorities having to issue Section 114 notices. So this is a kind of imminent, pressing crisis. It also has implications for the Department for Health and Social Care as well. We know that there is an extraordinary level of interest from members in bringing issues in the SEND system to the House. This is demonstrated in a recent adjournment debate in which I think there were about 10 members bobbing to speak in the adjournment debate on SEND in just one part of the country, and in a recent Westminster Hall debate that I was in on speech and language therapy, where members were allocated 90 seconds to speak because there were so many members crowding in. So there's an enormous appetite. We had a very, very good level of response, and there were more members that got in touch with me after the deadline for signing up for this debate. And I'd be really confident it'll be an oversubscribed debate because of the level of interest in it. The Prime Minister himself has acknowledged the extent of interest in this issue. I've heard him say many, many times that it's an issue that's been raised in every single PMQs since he became Prime Minister back in July. So we'd be enormously grateful if the committee was minded to grant this debate in March. I think there is a real urgency to it. We have local authorities voting on their budgets this week in many areas of the country without an understanding of what will happen at the end of the coming financial year. So I think that means it is pressing. In anticipation of your question, which I know will come, I think the appetite to debate this issue will continue, but I hope that the committee will take seriously the kind of very pressing nature of it in very many members' inboxes right now.
Okay. I mean, the one comment I would make, obviously, a very full list of speakers, and indeed, because we're considering probably applications for 90-minute debates, there's going to be one and a half minutes, if that, for each speaker, if they all turn up and want to speak. So it is a potential problem. Okay. Any questions from colleagues? No? All right. Well, thank you very much. The clerks will be in touch shortly. So the final application, I know the applicant is due here in about 5 minutes' time.
Hi.
And that's Liam Byrne on behalf of the Select Committee for Business and Trade Committee. Shall we suspend for 5 minutes and wait for him to arrive? I think that's the safest thing.
For break, I think.
For break, and allow people then to get their breath back. Order. will reconvene now, having concluded the applications for estimate day debates, bar one, who will come in a bit later on because he's stuck in the chairing the select committee at the moment. So we're moving on to applications for our customary backbench business debates. And the first application is from Liz Jarvis on free school meals. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this debate will be the first opportunity for members to debate the critical issue of free school meals since the election, and it's a timely moment to discuss ensuring all children can access warm, healthy and nutritious meals each day. We know that hungry children struggle to learn, and it's clear that millions of families are struggling, yet schools are often forced to cover the shortfall in funding for free school meals themselves. The reason for this debate came from conversations I've been having with local head teachers who have expressed to me the pressures that they are finding themselves under, and that they're having to make tough decisions between buying books or feeding the children, which is obviously a huge issue. I think we can all agree that the idea of breakfast clubs is an excellent idea, but the question is what happens to children during the rest of the day, and who is funding the free school meals. And I think this will be a really useful debate, and it's also an opportunity for all members to put on record their assessments of free school meals provision in their areas. It does have cross-party support, and I think it's a good time to have the debate.
Okay, lovely. Your application is, I should have said at the beginning, is for a Westminster Hall debate on a Tuesday.
Okay.
If we were able to offer you a Thursday instead, because obviously we have to make sure that it's the right answering department that is available for that Tuesday. We're not restricted on Thursdays. Would you be able to accept a Thursday debate if it was offered?
It would depend when the Thursday was.
Okay.
That's not very helpful, but
I mean, we won't be in a position to allocate it yet.
Yes,
anyway.
yeah.
Okay, right.
Thank you.
Any other questions, colleagues? Yes, go on.
I have a question. Is your assumption that it would be the Department of Education answering? Because the reason I ask is that my understanding of the issue with the rollout of universal alter enrolment for free school meals is that it's a GDPR issue in sharing the information from the Department of Work and Pensions to the Department of Education. So do you believe that the Department of Education is the best department to answer this debate, or would it be DWP?
I would suggest it's the Department of Education.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, colleagues? No? Well, thank you, Liz. The clerks will be in touch shortly. It's likely that we won't be able to allocate this very soon.
Okay.
Because it depends on the answering departments that are due to answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Luke Taylor on Thames Water and customer impact. This is the debate request for a 90-minute debate in Westminster Hall on either a Tuesday or Thursday. Over to you, Luke.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thames Water has failed its customers across the South East, leaving people with contaminated water, poor service and even sewage flooding homes and streets. Boat racers are wanted to stay out of the Thames due to E. coli, while the region's rare chalk streams are being poisoned by chemical imbalances. Local pubs and cafes, once thriving by the river, are now turning people away because of the foul stench of excrement in our waterways. Now, Thames Water plans to hike bills for customers by 31% this April. I'm appalled by this increase, and my constituents are equally as furious. I believe that a backbench business debate would provide an important opportunity for members to scrutinise the company, voice the concerns of their constituents, and ultimately hold the company to account. The debate would provide a platform to single out Thames Water and examine the issues it has caused in unique communities across the South East. It could explore problems such as Thames Water's environmental infractions, governance structure, the company's debt and bonus payouts, monitoring commitments, amongst many, many, many other concerns. I'm sure many of us in this House have fond memories of playing in waterways, but now shudder at the thought of our children doing the same. Thames Water serves over 16 million people and 25% of the UK population. This situation must change, and it starts by holding Thames Water, the company who caused this mess, responsible for its actions. Thank you for considering my application.
Thank you, Luke. Can I just be clear, which is the answering department?
DEFRA.
DEFRA. Okay, fine. Okay, any questions, colleagues? Yes, Will.
I'm on your list to speak, so I'm slightly biased, but just a little quibble of mine. Swindon is not in the southeast, so I will just say that we're covered by Thames Water as well.
I will fire the intern who put that word in there.
Yeah, just a quibble. That was it.
Absolutely right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, the clerks will be in touch in due course.
Thank you very much.
Right, our next application is from Ruth Jones on Christian persecution worldwide.
South East.
Thank you very much, Chair. And apologies for my lateness.
Oh, you weren't late, Ruth, don't worry.
Thank you.
You South East.
So this application is for a 90-minute debate in Westminster Hall on Tuesday morning.
Yes.
Over to you to present.
Thank you, Chair. As I'm sure you're all aware, in January every year, Open Doors launch its annual World Watch List exploring the top 50 countries where it's hardest to be a Christian. And this year, the situation has shown significant worsening in several countries, as well as a handful of improvements. And this debate, I believe, will be an opportunity to cover the wider situation across the globe concerning freedom of religion or belief, or none, around the world. And it's one that's been held annually in previous sessions since 2017, so we could be keeping up a good tradition here. And it's always attracted a substantial number of contributions from backbenchers. We know that freedom of religion or belief remains a foreign policy priority for the UK, and it is a key area of concern for many constituents. It also appeared in many of the last elections' manifestos, although we accept the parties have different approaches in how the UK should tackle FORB issues. So I believe this debate will be a good opportunity for members to raise the situation in countries that they have an interest in, represent their constituents' concerns, and debate the right approach going forward.
Thank you. Can I just ask, is there any time sensitivity to this? You mentioned.
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, it was
earlier.
Open
yeah.
Doors came out in January, so yeah, we're just following on from the back of that.
Which would be the answering department?
I suddenly thought that when you asked the last question, I'm not sure. I should know this answer. I'm very sorry. I will find
the reason why I ask is obviously it's a Tuesday application, so we have to have the correct answering department answering on that particular Tuesday before we can allocate. So you might want to consider that, because we won't be in a position to allocate this, I don't think, straight away. But obviously if we know the answering department, that makes it easier for us at our future meetings.
Thank you for your advice, Chair. I will certainly follow that up.
Any questions?
We're just all thinking the same thing.
You're just discussing across which department would it be? Yeah. Throwing ideas around.
The religious base is well, it could either be Foreign Office,
it could be
or it could be HCLG, because they've got the faith-based.
I mean, the special envoy for freedom of religion or belief, or the religious special envoy, is attached to the Foreign Office.
Foreign Office, yeah.
Oh, maybe that's the answer.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
That's any help.
If you could kindly advise the clerks which answering department you would expect, and then we can add that to our list. All right.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
The next application is from Andy McNay on state support for victims of terrorism. Once again, an application for a Westminster Hall debate on a Thursday. Over to you, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. So when I met with my constituent Travis Frayne, who was a victim of the Westminster Bridge attack March 2017, and he talked to me about his experience following that, I was pretty shocked. I kind of thought that as a state we would, have the backs of people injured in terrorist attacks on our soil, and yet what I found is that we don't. 76% of victims of terror, 300 victims of terror, would say that there's no or inadequate mental health support or post-traumatic support for them. Over 52% there's no financial support provided, that's including legal support. 46% of overseas attacks rate the support they received from foreign office as poor, and so on and so on. There's no structure for the support that we give, there's no preconditions for the support, and there's effectively no promise to victims of terror in this country that the state, as I say, will get their back. It's been a matter raised pretty consistently by victims since 2017. Both the Labour and Conservative parties have given commitments to a charter for survivors, but as yet that hasn't come about. There has been a 4-year review conducted by the previous government that didn't report before the previous election. I think myself and my fellow members and the victims of terror who we represent feel it is high time we had a proper debate on this subject. I should just mention that we asked for the Thursday because Thursday 22nd of March is the anniversary of the Westminster Bridge attack, which will be the most appropriate date. Beyond that, I think we would be most flexible to the date of the debate. And since we did put this application in, a number of other members have come forward to say would like to support it, including the full slate of Reform MPs. So
I understand the time sensitivity here. We wouldn't be able to allocate, I don't think, because we've already allocated for the day you've mentioned.
Yeah.
If it was the following week, would that be acceptable?
It could work. The alternative would be 22nd of May, which would be or thereabouts, which would be the anniversary of the Manchester Arena bombing, or 7/7.
Okay.
I think it would make sense to combine it with an anniversary, and obviously we'd like to bring victims groups down here, for the debate.
Okay. Right. Any questions, colleagues? Yes.
So it's more of a comment. This is really important. When we talk about victims, I've just encouraged to include the emergency services who themselves will have suffered massive trauma.
Absolutely, and actually, Chris, this is one of the reasons why we actually felt that the anniversary of the Westminster Bridge attack was particularly poignant, because of course it's a police officer who lost his life defending this place, and so it will be very much about him as well as the civilian survivors.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you, Andy. The clerks will be in touch shortly. Next application is from Natasha Irons on the long-term funding of youth services. Natasha.
Thank you, Chair. This is my first time in front of the committee, and it does feel a bit like Dragon's Den.
Sorry, I should say this is an application for a chamber debate.
Yes, it is. So I'm sure you've had the opportunity to review the application, so I'll keep my remarks brief. I'm hoping to bring forward this general debate because I don't think there's any plan more longer term than investing in the future and well-being of our young people. And with this debate, I hope to put our young people back up the political agenda. I hope to give members across the House an opportunity to highlight youth services in their constituencies. Obviously, yes, the challenges, but also the things that are working and the things where best practice can be shared, because I think there's a lot of stuff we can be learning from each other. And I also want to raise awareness about having a long-term sustainable funding model and looking at statutory protections for youth services. As you'll see in my application, we've seen a 73% decline in funding for youth services since 2010. We've had 54% of youth centres close. And at the same time, we've seen our children get sicker, both with their mental health and their physical health. We've seen rates of youth violence increase across the country. And we now have the awful label of having the unhappiest teenagers in Europe, which I don't think is good enough. So the government did announce last year that it's shaping a national youth strategy. I think it means it's a good time for us to have this debate and a good time for members to contribute to that conversation. And again, I think it signals to young people outside of this place that we're taking their future seriously, and that their MPs are taking their future seriously. So thank you for considering my application.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, colleagues? No? Thank you very much. The clerks will be in touch in due course.
Thank you.
Next application is from Andrew Lewin on the closer trading relationship with the European Union. It's not clear to me whether this is intended to be a chamber debate or a Westminster Hall debate. But is it?
Good afternoon, Chair. It is intended to be a chamber debate. I did put that on email, but apologies if that didn't come through in the original paperwork. But that is my hope.
It's just not on the application form. Okay,
I'm sorry for that.
That's fine.
Thank you for listening to me today. The trading relationship between the UK and the European Union is of critical and strategic importance to our economy. The European Union remains the UK's largest trading partner, and this government has a stated aim of negotiating an improved and closer deal, I believe it's really important that backbench members of Parliament have the opportunity to debate this issue and put forward proposals ahead of the UK-EU summit, which has been set for the 19th of May this year. I believe, if at all possible, a backbench debate in the Chamber in April would be the optimum time. I also believe that this is a matter of great public interest, with a number of recent polls showing that a majority of people do not believe that the Brexit deal signed by the last administration has been a success. My submission has cross-party support, and I hope it will be looked upon favourably. Thank you.
Any questions, colleagues?
I'm assuming if we are unable to give you a debate before the 19th of May, that the issues would still be pertinent afterwards. And so would you be happy to have a debate whenever that could come?
Of course, any debate is better than no debate, and I'm very conscious of the pressures on your time. But if it is at all possible to do so before the 19th of May, I think it is something that would capture the public interest as well as be of interest to backbench members of Parliament. Thank you.
Just to set your mind at rest, I did a quick calculation before recess, and we've got sufficient applications on our waiting list to take us to June.
Okay.
And probably the end of June, as things stand. That's in addition to the ones we've received today. So, just to make clear, and of course April is a very truncated month because of the April recess, Easter recess, basically. Anyway, yes.
Are you wedded to on that point? Are you wedded to a chamber debate? It's only because we could. I'm guessing, Chair, we'd probably get a Westminster Hall debate in earlier.
No, I wouldn't say I'm wedded. It's my preference, but I appreciate you've spoken to lots of colleagues with strong cases today. But I think if we're faced with a choice of a Westminster Hall debate or no debate before the summit on the 19th, my preference would be, if it's possible, Westminster Hall.
Thank you.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. The clerks will be in touch. Our next application is from Gregory Stafford on an end to frozen pensions. This is an application for Westminster Hall on a Thursday afternoon.
Thank you very much, Sir Bob. So the End Frozen Pensions campaign essentially advocates for the restoration of pension payments for UK pensioners living abroad in countries where their pensions are frozen, by which I mean that if they lived in the UK, the triple lock would protect their pensions and would go up by the relevant increments based on the triple lock. However, many UK pensioners living overseas in countries like Canada, Australia, South Africa receive pensions that don't increase in line with inflation, unlike those living in the UK. Obviously, that creates a financial hardship for those pensioners because, like in Britain, costs are rising across the world, and that means that it's impacting on their quality of life after they've paid into the British system for much or indeed all of their working life. The primary goal here is to push for legislation that will unfreeze the pensioners for those living abroad and ensure that they're treated equally to those in the UK. I think it's worth noting that actually in some countries their pensions are not frozen. So, for example, Liechtenstein or Lithuania, the pensions aren't frozen, so do increase in line with inflation because of the triple lock. But actually places, as I've mentioned, Canada, Australia, etc., often Commonwealth countries, it does not increase with inflation. A good example of this was Anne Puckridge, who moved to Canada. She came to the UK in January to highlight this case. She was 99, a few days off being 100 when she came. She'd served in all three branches of the armed forces in the Second World War. And as I said to the Prime Minister at PMQs at the time, it would have been a wonderful 100th birthday present for Anne Puckridge if he could have met with her to discuss this. Unfortunately, his diary didn't permit. But to give her example, Anne is currently on a fixed income of £72.50 per week, while the basic state pension here is £169 and the new state pension is £221 and some pence. So it's a significant difference for a war veteran. And so really what we want to do in this debate is to highlight the unfairness of this current system and to make sure that all British pensioners who've paid into our system receive a fair outcome.
Thank you. Any questions from colleagues? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Greg. The clerks will be in touch in due course.
Thank you.
That completes the applications for our general debates, and we return to the applications for Estimates Day debates. And our final request is from Liam Byrne on behalf of the Business and Trade Committee on spending of the Department for Business and Trade. And we know, Liam, that you were in committee, so...
Yes, Chair. Apologies for being late. Lord Sedwell slightly ran over in his evidence, but it's so excellent I didn't want to stop him in mid-flow. So thank you very much for having a look at this application. I suppose there's basically three reasons why we've put this application in, and we're conscious you've got the devil's choice to make between adjudicating between different committees that are all applying. So I think the three things that probably distinguish this application are, one, the government's growth mission is probably the most important mission. We've all got opinions on this across the House. The priorities and the budget for the Department of Business and Trade are the key to whether our country delivers on that growth mission. So there's a kind of political importance that's attached to this. Second, we as a committee have spent quite a lot of time and effort actually going to listen to the business community. So we have just published a report that for the House that came out a couple of weeks ago. That's the fruits of about 3 weeks' work as we've toured the country, run a big conference here in Westminster, actually just understanding what the priorities of the business community are. We've got a nice 7-8 point list in here of what we think the priorities of the business community are based on what we've heard. And so the debate is then an opportunity for the House to basically reflect on what does the business community think, and does the priorities in the budget of the Department of Business and Trade actually line up with what the business community thinks is important. But the third point, frankly, is that this is a department that has produced its accounts late, that has produced its accounts in a qualified form, and where the supplementary estimates that we've just agreed to be published before the House are something like 40% up on what they were before. And so much of that is obviously down to post office compensation schemes, but there are some significant issues with the British Business Bank and its balance sheet. And so we just think that departments that produce accounts late and produce accounts that are qualified need to have the scrutiny that only comes with a debate on the floor of the House of Commons. So priority, opportunity for members across the House to talk about their local businesses and whether the department is basically got a plan that matches those, and a point about House scrutiny for accounts that are late and are qualified. But I don't know whether Mr. Cooper would like to.
Thank you, Chair. So I sit with the Chairman on the committee. I think very few departments touch so many lives in Britain. I think the Department of Business and Trade, one way and another, influences all of our lives because it's so directly linked to the economy. As Liam has said, the growth strategy probably is something that across the House there's agreement on the idea of growth. The argument then is about how we achieve that. So there's a lot of interest in that. Where are we going? What is our relationship with the EU in that? What is our relationship with the US in that? Looking wider, there are other trade agreements around the world. So there's a lot of very broad issues that we need to kind of address. And then drilling down into those points again about the department's actual spending, much of that is focused on the post office compensation schemes in their various forms. We've already done some work on that, and it has been remarkable that a lot of the money that expended thus far has actually been on lawyers rather than on victims. So I think there's a lot of public interest in some of the work of this department as well. The business bank, again, a lot of hopes ride on that British Business Bank, but is it delivering? And I think that's an area that again we could have a look at. So obviously we are. Liam and I sit on opposite sides of the House, but I think that's a reflection of the interest in the Department of Business and Trade. I think everyone in this House has a stake in it, just as everyone in the wider public has an interest in it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I ask colleagues if they've got any other questions, obviously you weren't here when we covered the broad range of these.
Yes, apologies.
We've got 11 applications. We're only going to be able to grant 3 in the one day that we've got available to us. If you're not successful, would you want to be added to our waiting list for general debates in the chamber?
Yes, I think so. We think there's plenty of material and interest here across the House. So yes, please, Chairman.
Any questions from colleagues? No? Well, thank you for your presentation. The clerks will be in touch very shortly.
Thanks very much for your patience. Thank you.
That concludes the public business of the committee. The committee will now go into private session to consider the applications we've heard and decide which allocations we can grant and which go on the waiting list. Order.